Now that is one of the wonderful things about this book of Patanjali's, the Yoga Sutras, the Yoga Aphorisms. The definitions in the Indian mode are different from the definitions in the Western mode, in this respect particularly, that they tend to be more dynamic, less static. In the Western definition, they tend to look for absolutes. It's been the legacy of Aristotle and Aristotelian logic, either this or that. A thing cannot be both one thing and its opposite. It has to be one or the other. It can't be in between. It has to be clearly black or white, clearly A or B. And so we have in our Western tradition the tendency to find the one exact meaning for everything. It's a static thing which tries to put things in their little boxes and leave them there. This isn't the way life is. Life is a constantly moving, a constantly growing thing, and no definition will serve indefinitely. Once you've used it and reached the limits of it, you've got to go beyond it. Thomas Aquinas' definition is good as far as it goes. But if you think of man in his irrational moments, which is certainly a part of being human, then suddenly you can't use his definition. You can only offer it as a potential, but it's not a reality. If you think of man as indeed an heir to the angels and a child of God, then neither rational nor animal works. And so any definition is sort of like climbing up to a particular ledge in order to be able to go to a higher ledge on a mountain. And logic itself is useful with its definitions to bring us up to a point after which that same logic, those same definitions serve as obstacles because they hold us down. They put blinders on our eyes and prevent us from being able to see further into the more and more intuitive reaches of understanding. Intuition goes beyond definition. Definition is only a tool of logic. And so we find in the Indian method that there is a much more fluid kind of approach because they don't have this thought of Aristotle's. Aristotle, you could liken Aristotelian logic to a net in the middle of a tennis court. And everything on one side is, if you're the good guys and the enemy is the bad guys, that everything on your side is good and everything on the other side is bad. Everything on one side is right, everything on the other side is wrong, and divided by the net. But of course some things are closer to the net and some things are further away. In the Indian method, they don't, to use the same illustration, but it would no longer make a tennis game, the Indians would move the net in either direction according to the circumstances. That anything west of it, let's say, is right and anything east of it is wrong, but if the net is almost all the way to the west, practically everything will be east. For a very simple and good example of this, supposing we had heard Mahatma Gandhi right at the height of his fame as an ascetic and a servant of humanity, supposing we'd heard that he had suddenly decided to give up all this serving of people and go out and become a millionaire. Everybody would say, "My God, what's happened?" They would have been very disappointed. But supposing some lazy fellow who never did anything with his life decided one morning he was going to go out and become a millionaire, everybody would applaud. The same act, but because of the reference, because morality is not an absolute thing, all on one side of a net or all on the other side. It's a growing thing depending on where you are in your level of understanding. Thus, that is good, which takes you closer to a higher goal, an ultimate goal. That is bad, which takes you away from that. Yogananda said once to me, "All things are evil that are not in God." And he meant that in a relativistic sense. In other words, from the reference of God, everything outside of that is delusion. But that's certainly not valid for us, because a lot of things, although still in delusion, take us from delusion toward enlightenment. Being kind, even if there's the thought of the ego that I am being kind, that's a delusion. And yet it's a good delusion, because it takes us out of selfishness toward that realization that there's no I even to be kind, you see? So, in the Indian system, the understanding is actually a great deal more not only subtle, but realistic.